The Night Shift at Riverside Towers. My name is Thomas Wright, and I'm 39 years old. I work as the evening and night shift cleaning supervisor at Riverside Towers, a 42-story office building located in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. And the night I found documents in an office trash can that revealed a human trafficking operation is the night I discovered that sometimes the most important information in an organization is what people throw away. Before I begin, if you ever work a cleaning or maintenance job at a corporate building, pay attention to what you find in the waste. Keep listening, because the pattern I discovered through careful observation of discarded items would lead me to uncover a crime that the authorities had no idea was happening just floors above the public eye. I had been working at Riverside Towers for 6 years. My job was to oversee the cleaning crews that came in every evening from 6 to midnight. We were responsible for cleaning all the office spaces, the bathrooms, the common areas, and the break rooms. We would empty the trash. We would vacuum the carpets. We would wipe down the desks. We would make sure the building was pristine and ready for the next day of business. It was steady work. The pay was decent. The hours were somewhat reasonable since I worked evenings instead of the brutal overnight shift that some of the other supervisors handled. Riverside Towers was a professional building. It housed the offices of various corporations. There were accounting firms. There were law offices. There were financial services companies. There were consulting firms. It was the kind of building where important business happened, where serious money was managed, where decisions were made that affected people across the country. My crew was usually about 10 to 15 people depending on the night and the season. We would arrive at 6 in the evening. We would work until midnight, or sometimes 1 in the morning, depending on how much work needed to be done. Then we would leave, and the overnight security team would take over. The overnight team was just a few guards walking the halls and monitoring the security cameras. For the first 5.5 years I worked there, the job was routine. We cleaned. We emptied the trash. We made sure everything was ready for the next business day. The tenants would occasionally complain about something. Maybe we missed a spot. Maybe something wasn't clean to their liking. But mostly it was just normal building maintenance work. But about 6 months ago, something changed. Something that started with me noticing discrepancies in what was being thrown away from one particular office. It was the office of a company called Meridian International Consulting. They occupied most of the 23rd floor. They seemed to be a legitimate consulting firm. They had about 50 employees. They seemed professional. They seemed normal. But what they threw away was not normal. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. But over the course of several weeks, I started to notice a pattern. The trash from Meridian International would contain documents that didn't match the type of business a consulting firm should be doing. There were photographs. There were printed emails. There were documents with names and addresses. There were lists of locations. There were notes that mentioned transportation and costs and numbers that seemed like they were pricing people. I should have gone directly to security. I should have reported what I was seeing to management. But I wanted to understand what I was looking at. I wanted to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding something before I made an accusation. So I started to carefully collect the discarded documents from that office. I would separate them from the rest of the trash. I would keep them in a bag that I carried with me. By the time I had accumulated enough documents to make sense of the pattern, I was deeply concerned. I was looking at what appeared to be records of people. There were names. There were photographs of women. There were documents that referenced visas and work permits. There were financial records showing money transfers. There were notes mentioning locations like hotels and addresses of residences in the surrounding area. The more I read, the more convinced I became that Meridian International Consulting was not actually a consulting firm. It was an operation that was bringing women into the country on false pretenses. It was an operation that was apparently trafficking people. The trash told a story of an organization that was organizing the movement and exploitation of human beings. I felt sick. I felt angry. I felt like I had stumbled onto something that was happening right above my head while I cleaned the floors below. I felt like the building that I'd worked in for 6 years was harboring a criminal operation. I felt like I had a responsibility to do something about what I discovered. The Wednesday night that changed everything, I was working my regular shift. The building was in the process of being cleaned. My crew was on various floors doing their assigned work. I was on the 23rd floor, overseeing the cleaning of the Meridian International office. There were still a few people working late. I could see them through the glass walls of their offices. They were working at their desks. They seemed to be preparing for something. They seemed tense. They seemed to be communicating in hushed tones. One of my crew members, a woman named Rosa, came to me and said, there was something in the trash can in the private conference room that I should see. She said she'd found it when she was emptying the cans. She said she wasn't sure if it was important, but something about it made her uncomfortable. She gave me a piece of paper. It was a manifest listing names and times and locations. It appeared to be a schedule of when and where women would be transported. It listed a location in the Riverside area. It listed a date of the following Friday. It listed specific times. It listed drop-off points. This was different from the other documents I'd found. This wasn't just evidence of the crime. This was an active operation. This was a scheduled activity. This was something that was going to happen in just 4 days. I understood at that moment that I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't try to figure this out on my own. I had to contact law enforcement. I told Rosa to finish her work and to not mention anything to anyone. I told her to keep the documents safe. Then I left the building. I went home. I gathered all the documents I had been collecting. I put them in a folder. I called the Atlanta Police Department. The next morning I went to the police station. I brought the documents. I explained to a detective what I had found. I explained the pattern. I explained what I believed was happening. The detective listened carefully. He looked at the documents. He asked me detailed questions about the office and the company and the people I had seen working there. The detective told me he was going to contact the FBI. He said what I had described sounded like human trafficking. He said it was a serious federal crime. He said they would need to investigate. He said I needed to be careful and not mention this to anyone at my workplace. Over the next few days, federal agents became involved. They began their own investigation into Meridian International Consulting. They set up surveillance on the office. They monitored communications. They gathered their own evidence. And they waited for the scheduled transportation on Friday to see if the operation I had discovered was actually in motion. Friday night I was working my regular shift. The building was quieter than usual. There seemed to be fewer people in the Meridian International office. The weather that evening had turned bad. A severe thunderstorm was moving through Atlanta. The rain was heavy. The wind was strong. The lightning was frequent. It was the kind of weather that would make people cancel plans or stay inside. But Meridian International was proceeding with their operation. I could see movement in their office despite the storm. I could see people moving around with a sense of urgency. I could see them carrying bags and boxes. I could see them preparing for something. And I knew that outside the building, federal agents were watching. Federal agents were waiting for the moment when the operation would reveal itself. I continued my cleaning. I tried to act normal. I tried not to watch the office too closely. I tried to just do my job. But I was aware of every movement. I was aware of every person who came and went from that office. I was aware of the tension and the urgency of whatever was happening up there. Around 9:30 that evening, I saw them. Through the windows of the office, I saw a group of women. They appeared to be from various countries based on their appearance. They looked scared. They looked confused. They looked like they didn't understand what was happening. They were being escorted by men from the Meridian International office. The men were herding them like cattle. They were directing them toward the elevators. I immediately called the detective. I told him what I was seeing. I told him the operation was moving. I told him to move in. The detective told me to stay away from the elevators. He told me to go to a secure location in the building. He told me federal agents were moving in right now. Within minutes, the building was swarming with federal agents. They came through the entrances. They went up the stairwells. They surrounded the elevators. They were moving with tactical precision. They were moving with the intention of stopping a crime in progress. I watched from a maintenance closet where I had hidden myself. I watched the agents move through the building. I watched them head toward the elevators, where the women and the men from Meridian International were standing. And then I heard the commands. The agents shouting for people to get on the ground. The agents drawing weapons. The agents taking control of the situation. Within 30 minutes, it was over. The men from Meridian International were in handcuffs. The women were being cared for by federal agents. The operation had been stopped. The crime had been prevented. The women who were being trafficked would not be transported to whatever situation Meridian International had planned for them. The federal agents found me in the maintenance closet. They thanked me. They said my discovery had prevented a human trafficking operation. They said the women I had helped save would get assistance. They said the people responsible would face federal charges. They said they were grateful for what I had done. But here's what haunts me about that night. Here's what I think about when I'm working and I see trash being thrown away. That operation had been happening for months. Those people at Meridian International had been trafficking women for months. They had been doing it in a building where hundreds of people worked every day. They had been doing it right above the heads of employees who came to work in good faith, believing they were working for legitimate companies. And no one had known. No one had suspected. No one had noticed until I started paying attention to what people threw away. Until I started noticing the discrepancies. Until I started collecting evidence from the trash cans. Until I recognized a pattern that everyone else in that building had missed. The scariest part is this. The scariest part is knowing that there are probably other operations like Meridian International happening in other buildings right now. There are probably other criminals operating in plain sight. There are probably other women being trafficked through office buildings and hotels and legitimate-seeming businesses, while the people around them remain completely unaware. And the other thing that haunts me is what would have happened if I hadn't paid attention. What if I had just emptied the trash without looking at it? What if Rosa hadn't brought that manifest to my attention? What if I had decided that it wasn't my business to investigate? What if I had just done my job and gone home? Those women would have been transported. Those women would have disappeared into the trafficking network. Those women would have been exploited and abused and treated like property. The federal agents arrested 15 people that night. People working for Meridian International. People who were part of the operation. They found evidence of at least 32 women who had been trafficked through their operation over an 8-month period. They found records of their crimes. They found evidence of their intent to continue trafficking. Some of the women who were saved that night came to me afterward. They thanked me. They told me that I had saved their lives. They told me that they had no idea what was happening to them until the federal agents arrived. They told me they had been lied to. They had been promised legitimate jobs. They had been promised places to live. They had been promised that they would be able to send money to their families. Instead, they were going to be exploited and abused, but I received no public credit, no media attention, no recognition from the building or the companies that occupied it. The operation was shut down quietly. The women were helped quietly. The investigation proceeded quietly, and I went back to my job of cleaning office buildings and paying attention to what people throw away. I think about those women sometimes. I wonder where they are now. I wonder if they recovered from what they experienced. I wonder if they were able to return to their countries. I wonder if they were able to reconnect with their families. I hope they're safe. I hope they're happy. I hope that the experience of being saved changed their lives for the better. But I also think about the pattern I discovered. I think about how the trash told a complete story. I think about how the discarded documents revealed a crime that no surveillance camera in the building had caught. I think about how the answer to an invisible crime was right there in the waste receptacles of a corporate office. I think about how, if I had been a different kind of person, if I had been someone who didn't pay attention, if I had been someone who didn't care, those women would have disappeared. So if you work in a building, if you work in cleaning or maintenance or security, please pay attention. Please notice the patterns. Please look at what people throw away. Please understand that sometimes the most important evidence is literally in the trash. Please understand that you might be the only person who sees something that no one else notices. Please understand that your job, no matter how humble, might be the thing that stands between someone and exploitation. And if you see something that doesn't add up, something that doesn't make sense, something that seems wrong, please report it. Please tell someone. Please don't assume that someone else will catch it. Please don't assume that the authorities already know. Please understand that sometimes the only person who can stop a crime is someone like you. Someone working a regular job. Someone paying attention. Someone who cares enough to notice when something is wrong. The thunderstorm that night in Atlanta was severe, but it wasn't the storm that changed the course of those women's lives. It was the attention I paid to the trash. It was the pattern I recognized. It was the decision I made to do something about what I had discovered. It was the willingness to step in and report a crime that no one else had noticed, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I was the person who found those documents. I'm grateful that I had the courage to report what I'd discovered. I'm grateful that federal agents took my information seriously and acted on it. But mostly, I'm grateful that those women were saved, that their lives were interrupted before they were destroyed, that they got a chance to go home, that they got a chance to survive, because that's what it was really about. Not the crime or the criminals or the investigation. It was about the women. It was about the fact that by paying attention to something as simple as the trash being thrown away in an office building, I helped save the lives of 32 women who were being exploited. And every time I empty a trash can, now, every time I see something discarded, I think about that night. I think about the manifest with the schedule. I think about the women standing in the elevators, looking scared and confused. I think about the federal agents moving in to stop the crime. And I'm grateful that I was paying attention. I'm grateful that I noticed. I'm grateful that I cared enough to do something about it.